Yeah, we did it tough, but that's the whole point. The whole point is what we experienced wasn't good. So why would we want the next generation to go through it?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gerardo Poli.
And this, oh, sorry. Okay.
I'm Gerardo Poli.
I'm Hubert Hemstra, and this is the Vet Vault. So I noticed Dr. Justin Ward, who is our guest for this episode, out there in the vetosphere. Let's call it the vetosphere. Do you like that word?
I love the vetosphere.
I just made that word up.
That was pretty good.
Trademarked. Right. So there's all these discussions online and in person and in conferences about our profession. People talking about what's wrong with it. Why are people leaving the profession? What are the possible solutions? And then time and time again, I see this voice of reason come through the noise, and it's Dr. Justin Ward. And I've been thinking for ages, man, I've got to get this guy on the show and pick his brains on the podcast. So here we are.
Dr. Justin Ward is a friend of mine. I've known him for a long time. He grew up in South Africa, where he studied veterinary science at the best facility in the world. Hubert wrote this, and I'm just replaying this. Nah, just kidding. After a brief stint of locuming, he headed to the UK with his then girlfriend, now wife, where he worked and traveled for 5 years before he finally settled here in Australia, like all South African veterinarians do. After 4 more years of working in a practice, he made the move to practice ownership, which is often where the story concludes for our guests. Well, not this time. Justin's first foray into ownership, as you will hear, did not go fantastic. So after a few years, he sold his shares and moved on to see where his fate would take him. And as it turns out, it was a good place. Fast forward 9 years, and he is now the co-owner of a practice that has gone from 1 vet and 1.5 nurses to 9 vets and 22 staff.
Justin contributed to the profession outside of his practice by serving on the AVA branch committee, where he was also president for a year. These days, Justin is, and I quote, pretty passionate about being involved in shaping the future of our profession. In our chat, we cover the experience when your first journey into practice ownership goes wrong and what you can learn from it. And then when your second round goes really well, what can we learn from that? Like what makes for a good business partner? What makes a good workplace, to finding that balance between having a financially successful practice and one where clients will still want to come to. We also look at the broader veterinary profession to find out the opinions of someone who's been in the game for a while and who has his finger on a pulse. Somebody cynical might say that it's a weak, shocky kind of a pulse, like a really thready one. But I personally think it's a bounding pulse, maybe a little bit of a fast heart rate and blood's just pumping a little bit hard for everybody to control. But it's exciting times, and Justin has some awesome opinions on what's happening. So please enjoy this insightful and very optimistic episode with Dr. Justin Ward.
You're magical, mate.
Before we kick off with Justin, we're just going to take 5 minutes to tell you about a very exciting conference that Gerardo is helping to organize. So if you really just want to get to the conversation with Justin, skip the next 5 minutes, but you'd be a fool because it's really pretty cool and pretty exciting and really great value. So have a quick listen. We'll see you on the other side of this. Gerardo, you have some exciting news for our listeners.
Yes, and that is a special offer that we have for all of you Vet Vault listeners to participate in a virtual online conference called Thrive 2021. What is Thrive 2021? Over the last 3 years, AEA, or Animal Emergency Australia, AES, and Perth Veterinary Emergency Service has worked closely together to develop a program that complements our internal clinical training programs. And that is a program that is around delivering what I call performance skills to our staff. Things on stress, things on energy, confidence, imposter syndrome, understanding the value, understanding your self-worth, understanding what time management means in terms of your stress and your impact on your work, understanding how to manage aggressive clients and coping with grief. the things that all veterinarians, all veterinary staff, all para-veterinary professionals or support staff tackle on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. A couple of those things that you mentioned there, the dealing with the angry client, the time management. If you can sort out time management, you'll relieve so much stress in your own life. It's something I still struggle with.
I still struggle with it on a day-to-day basis as well. Like 100%, Hubert.
So you've got the Thrive conference, and you said used to be for AES staff only, but now you're opening up to who? Anyone? Emergency vets only?
Yes. Yeah. Like I get it. It's like why are we opening it up now? And it was a conversation with our CEO, Rob. I had a conversation with him, go like, hey man, we've got 3 days with 20 speakers from across Australia with like close to 20 discussion sessions, almost 15 hours of virtual online coaching and training from people who are the best in their field. And we have all these people and then what? We keep it to ourselves. And I said to Rob, why don't we offer this to people around Australia? And he goes, well, that's your job. And I was like, shit, I just put my foot in it. And now all of a sudden I have to share this with everyone.
You just said inside Australia. Why only inside Australia? Is it beyond?
Well, it's not within Australia now. It's now gone global. And we've reached out to large groups of veterinary hospitals around the world.
It's almost, some of those things you discuss I don't think it's an exaggeration to say they can be life-saving if you manage to get the hang of it and execute it well. So what do we do? Where do we sign up? What's the go? It sounds like 3 days of high value CPD, not a cheap thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, and you would think for 3 days of that, okay, 3 days of that, full price is $120 per person. But for our Vet Vault listeners, all Vet Vault listeners can get access to this program for 66% off. So that's $40 per person. Okay. $40 each, provided that you register before the 1st of August.
That's fantastic. That's nothing. I think the big question that everybody wants to know is, are you going to let me interview people live on stage at Thrive?
Okay. I don't know if I trust the Hubert. No, 100%.
Sold. Sounds good. How do we get access, mate? How do we get the Vet Vault $40 special price?
All you need to do is head to www.thrivingvet.com.au. So that's thrivingvet.com.au. And then down the bottom, you purchase a ticket and then write in there, VV Thrive, VVTHRIVE, and you get access to this virtual online conference for $40.
Now, it's a virtual event, yeah? No live event.
It's a virtual event, yes.
So is it going to be recorded? If I can't make it, I'm a shift worker. Of course, I want to learn my shift work, but I've got my shift on that weekend.
Yeah, totally. That was the biggest challenge that we had as well. So what we're going to do, if you've registered and you purchased the ticket, you can watch the conference later on our online platform, our Vetipedia online platform. So we'll put it on there, and then you can watch the whole entire conference at your leisure. But you need to register for the conference. So please take action. You have to use this coupon code before the 1st of August. The 1st of August.
Oh, not a lot of time. When is the actual conference? Have we said that?
Oh, and we haven't. No, the conference is on the 1st and 2nd and 3rd of September. I get it. It's short notice, and everything in the world of emergency is last minute. And given that I am the key organizer of this conference, it's all last minute. But trust me, the value you will get out of this conference will be incredible. I am looking forward to all these speakers. And part of it is that I want to learn this stuff too.
Yeah, 100%.
But I want this to share. I want to share this with all of you.
Done. We'll see you there, everybody. Right. Should we get to our guest for tonight?
Let's get to the guest.
Dr. Justin Ward, welcome to the Vet Vault.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
I've been watching Justin on the socials, really, on veterinary groups, voicing strong opinions, which I love strong opinions because to me, a strong opinion means that it's somebody who cares about something deeply. And whether I agree or disagree with an opinion, I just like that care thing. Gets philosophical really quickly, but I watched a famous speech by Jim Carrey. What do they call it? Those speeches that the celebrities do at universities, graduation speech. And he ends his speech by saying, in life, there's only ever two choices, love and fear. And the correct choice is always love. And I've thought of that a lot since listening to that. Everything you do, if you think about life like that, it's a really insightful thing. And the point of my story is when I look at your posts, I feel like there's a bit of love there for the profession. And I thought, let's talk to this guy. And I want to hear what he has to say. But we'll get back to your opinions and the future of the vet profession and everything a little bit later. But first, we want to start with something new, Gerardo. I haven't warned you about this. I did this course recently with a radio personality who listened to the podcast and is trying to help us to find some things to make it a bit more engaging. And she suggested something for the guests called Two Truths and a Lie, where at the start of the show, the guest has to tell us three things. One of them is a lie. And by the end of the show, we have to guess which is the lie. I have warned Justin about this. So Justin, hit us with your three stories.
Okay, well, when you mentioned this to me, I thought I better try and keep it veterinary related and obviously appropriate and not something that's going to incriminate me later on. So yeah, I've come up with three. So here we go. So number one, I've traveled a lot. And whilst traveling in South America, in Peru, I was on a sort of cultural visit to a village and I ended up eating an entire guinea pig. I thought it would be served maybe in a stew or something, but it was the whole guinea pig roasted. And yeah, I got through it, but I couldn't talk about it for about 3 weeks later because it just reminded me of my patients. And I thought I'd let them down. So that's the first one, consuming my patients. The second one is, as you can probably tell by my accents, grew up in South Africa and I did a bit of wildlife work. And I have a scar running down my back from a buffalo that managed to just gouge me with its horn when we were reversing the buffalo. So we dart them with M99, which I think is their torphine. And once we've done our tuberculosis testing and everything like that, you have to give an intravenous reversal, get them back on their feet. And I was a bit slow and he caught me just on the back. So I've got a nice scar as a memento of that experience. And the third thing is most of my colleagues would know I'm not a huge fan of horses. And when I was a vet student, I didn't like the beasts and was actually quite scared of them. So my first practical, one of my fellow students gave me some what sounded like sound advice, and that was to put a heap of sugar in my top chest pocket, and that would get the horse to pay some attention to me and I could do what I wanted. But what ended up happening was the horse actually bit me really badly on the chest.
You're on the boob.
And we had to stop the exam and get some medical attention. Yeah, that's the three: eating a guinea pig, a buffalo scar, and bitten by a horse during my prac exams.
But buffalo almost tore you a new one, eh? Is that what it is?
Yeah, they're scary animals, those. They are scary. Yeah.
So how did you transition? How did you transition from South Africa to Australia?
So I qualified in South Africa, and then I think I did a sort of couple of weeks work in locuming, but basically like a lot of South Africans and Australians and Kiwis headed straight for the UK and spent 5 years there doing the usual work and travel around the world thing with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, and that was fantastic. And then we got to a stage where we sort of got married and decided to settle down a little bit, and the UK just wasn't for us. We're outdoor people, and the old weather over there on Mud Island, as we like to call it, wasn't for us. And the political situation in South Africa, I guess we just thought, well, let's try something else. And Lisa's got half her dad's family are Australian, so we thought, let's go and check out Australia. So we came out here in 2005, and I think within about 24 hours, I knew this was the place for me. And here we are. So,
and the Gold Coast. You went straight to the Gold Coast, and you have left the Gold Coast, or
no? I went down to Sydney because that's where some of the family were, and Sydney's a nice place, but unless you have a lot of money and live on the beachfront, it's too big, it's too busy. And so we started looking for jobs out of the city, and I was thinking Central Coast of New South Wales, and actually saw a job in Tweed Heads, which is New South Wales. And flew up here and thought, oh, this is pretty nice. Actually reminds me of my hometown of Durban back in South Africa. And just made a leap of faith and came up and haven't looked back. So we're only in Sydney for about 6 months, I think. So pretty much been on the Gold Coast the whole time. Yeah.
This is so bizarre, man. Other than gored by a buffalo, your story is my story, including the eating of the guinea pig. I make.
We don't know if that one's the real one or not, bro.
For me, it's the truth. And then, so Justin, when you arrived in Oz, you would have worked as an employee for a bit, employed vet, but then you made the leap to practice ownership, to a practice or something. How long after qualifying, roughly, was that? How far into your career?
So that would have been, so I set up my first practice in 2009. I qualified in 2000, so 9 years. Okay. So I guess when I left the UK in 2005, I was at the point where I wanted to become a partner or own a practice. And I guess the immigration process did set that back a little bit, because it obviously takes a bit of time to find your feet and figure out where the opportunities are. So yeah, so 9 years into my career, 2009, I set up my first practice with the vet that I was working for, and I had that practice for 3 years, and then that partnership ended, and I set up my current practice in 2012, and that has grown very nicely since then. And yeah, here we are.
You got two locations now, is that right? Or
no, just one. So we moved. Yeah. So
that's right. Yeah.
So we ran out of space, and we built a purpose-built hospital and moved. I think my vision and my business partner who came on later, our vision was always to have one big hospital with a lot of vets rather than the multi-site practice, for a number of reasons. But I think where we live on the Gold Coast, and I think this may be fairly typical of all major urban areas in Australia, the big practice is kind of fragmenting up into heaps of little 1 and 2 man practices. And I blame Gerardo for that, because it's these awesome emergency clinics that really have allowed that, because there's no need to do after hours or share after hours. So everyone can set up their own little thing. But it's not the best business model, really. You know, you're dropping 80,000 on a digital DR X-ray system, and one vet's using it, whereas I've got 8 vets. And we are finding, and probably what we're going to talk about a bit later on, is when we employ vets, we always ask them why. Even when we interview them, why did you apply for this job? Why did you feel you wanted to come and work for Reedy Creek Vets? And one of the most consistent answers was from younger vets was that they wanted a multi-vet practice. They wanted support, they wanted mentoring, they didn't want to be sole charge, they didn't want to just be them and the boss kind of thing. That's been our vision and our model, and it's worked very well for us.
So like leveraging your investment to its maximum, like it's at your X-ray machine across 8 vets, I cannot imagine. And then the team, I totally understand that, because when I graduated at UQ, we're looking around for jobs, and then the ones which are the most attractive that everyone went for were the ones which are like 6, 7 vets, even like 4 to 5. Anything that wasn't like a one-man band, which is sad because they're the guys that really need help. But yeah, you just support and mentoring.
20 years in, it's not just about mentoring. I don't like working alone. Yeah, I can do it.
You're just a sook and you're scared.
No,
I don't like it either. No, I don't like it. I could never go back to a small practice now.
No, neither could I. And just being able to bounce ideas. And the other thing is that it's allowed us within the practice to actually focus on our areas of interest. So for instance, one of my interests is orthopedic surgery, and I have been able to train up and perform TPLOs. And because of the size of the practice, I get about 50 a year now. I did one today, and we've got another one booked in for Thursday. So that's allowed me to focus on that. And I've got the caseload from the size of the practice, and we've got other vets that are focused on things like ultrasound and echo, on chemo, internal medicine. So that's the other advantage, I guess, is that each person's little interest kind of pulls the collective standard up without having to be a jack of all trades the whole time.
Do you find, one thing that I find about that, one downside I find about that, is that when someone starts to become the expertise of that particular skill set within the hospital, that then they somewhat territory guard. I'm not saying you do this, right? But like, it's kind of like, this is my thing, and I'm only want to be in the surgery suite with the bones and my drills and stuff. But then someone who then wants to do that then is blocked by that narrowing down of the roles. So growth is stifled from the specialization. I don't know. How have you come across that, and how have you tackled that?
No, you're absolutely right. That definitely can happen. It does happen. Most vets are pretty sensible and don't want to touch bones. So there's been no one asking me to let them have a crack, which excuse the pun. But no, you're right, and we're very conscious of that. And for instance, we have some really good ultrasonography skills in our practice, but a lot of the young vets really want to develop that. So we've actually got 2 vets at the moment who we're paying to attend different courses. Now, I suppose you could argue that the business doesn't need that. And we've already got great skills. We don't need 3 masters of ultrasound, but that's important for these guys, for their career path. And that's part of our vision to create a career path for them. We've also structured things so that we do have the time for those people who have those little special interests to actually share those with other people. Because when you do get busy, it's easy just to say, look, I'll just do it. And that happens a lot. We've employed vets that have worked with people who have special skills in certain areas and said, what can you tell us about that? They can say, well, nothing, because I never ever got a look in. That person always did that stuff. So you're right, it does happen and it is an issue, but I think we're conscious of it and work to ensure that it doesn't happen. And we're still a GP practice, like all our vets, all of us are still general practitioners. We're not simply doing one.
It sounds like it's something that has to be sorted out either at the job interview, if you know what you want to do. Let's say I want to go and work at your clinic and I really want to do ultrasound. We've got to get that on the table and say, this is my path. Is it going to work for me in this clinic, in the career? You might not know when you start a job, get out and then go, look, speak to the boss and say, hey, is there a pathway for me to do X, Y, and Z? But I think it's important. It's great that you bring it up, Gerardo. It's a good point. I've never thought of that. I've said there's a very good reason why I don't touch the bones. Well, probably inherent. It's always grossed me out a bit, but I've always worked in a clinic where there was a strong orthopod, where there was never the need. And you're right, it just sort of disappeared. I was never in a situation where anybody said, hey, mate, you've got to learn how to fix this because nobody else is going to do it. So I just could always handle it. So it's good to be aware of it. Great point. I like that.
You were saying before, a couple of questions on basically what you were saying, Justin, but you're saying that the people who come to you, they said they wanted to work in a team and have support and mentoring. What does support and mentoring look like in your practice? Like, how does it roll out for you guys?
Well, I think the first thing is just to have a healthy culture that allows two-way communication, between everyone, so that people can ask questions if they're not sure. They can ask for help. So I think that communication needs to be there, because I've certainly worked when I was a young vet in places where I didn't want to ask for help because the boss was grumpy and never available, and there really wasn't that sort of two-way communication. So I think, first of all, the culture that we have in terms of communication, and also it's one of our core values to be progressive. When we employ people, we say to them, listen, if you see something that we're doing that you think can be done better, we want you to tell us. If you don't tell us, that's actually we'll be angry. Because we want to constantly evolve. So we need you to come and tell us, hey, where I used to work, they did things like this. And we have constantly evolved because of that. So I think the culture and the communication helps. The other thing, and look, I definitely would not profess to have got this perfect or be an expert, but my business partner, Matt, and I have got to a point now where we have stepped back. So clinically, in terms of being rostered on clinically, we're not working full time, but we're at the practice pretty much full time. So we have made ourselves available for staff to, for myself, for instance, if they want to book in a surgery and if they want someone looking up over their shoulder, then I'm there. I can do that with them. Or if somebody's taking, if they're trying to do their first, canine extraction and it's taking forever and they're not going to make the afternoon consults, then we'll jump in and do their first few consults so they can just get through that procedure. We also, for a long time now, we've used Slack, which a lot of people be familiar with. It's just an app, internal communication, and that works extremely well. And we have different channels on that where people can communicate, and there are clinical ones for the vets. We haven't been so good at this lately with COVID, but we try and have regular reviews, performance reviews, and give feedback to the staff, particularly the young staff. And we have once a month we have a vet meeting. We have a kind of journal club, I guess, just after hours, get all the vets together, go through some of the tricky cases. Somebody presents on a certain topic, and we use that time to talk about protocols and help people out with difficult cases and all that kind of stuff. So, I think we could always do better, but those are what we're doing, and hopefully that's how young vets develop in their careers.
So your performance reviews, does that include a chat about things like what are your goals with your career? Where do you want to go? What skills do you want to develop? Is it something that comes up fairly frequently or with some regularity?
Yeah, every time. And I think when you're young, you sometimes, I certainly didn't know exactly what I wanted to do initially. So that's really important because we want to support these guys. And I think Matt and I also have this philosophy. I think, Hubert, you said earlier about if you've got a certain skill or certain direction you want to go in, trying to discuss that early on and making sure the practice is the right fit. We're very conscious that, yes, it's a tough career and those first kind of 5 years are so critical. And we want to make sure that we can provide for our vets. And if we can't, then we want to help them head off in a direction that is going to provide that for them. So we're constantly communicating that. If one of our vets came to us and said, listen, I want to do this. I want to get into wildlife, and you guys just don't really do it. So I'm thinking of going to work somewhere else. That would obviously be really sad, but we would support them and help them in whatever way we could, because the big picture is we're dealing with people's lives. Yeah, we're dealing with people's careers, and it's our duty really to make sure that we can assist them in whatever way we can. And even if that means that what we can provide is insufficient, we just got to accept that and help them along. I was at an AVA leadership event a few years ago now, and they had an interesting exercise. They broke the whole room, there must have been 50 people, into two groups. And they asked people to think through their lives about someone who's had a really negative influence on them and their career. And then the other group, they said someone who had a really positive influence on them and their career. Yeah. First boss. And that stuck with me. I thought, man, I do not want to be that bad boss. But it was the first boss. It blew me away. I was like, wow. And, the point was, as employers, we've got a responsibility. And I think as vets, I don't know if you guys have ever read the E-Myth. It's a bit of an old book now, but a lot of the time we just head out and open a practice and make a job for ourselves, and we're not equipped as leaders and as mentors and all these things, and that can be disastrous. I think it's our duty, and it makes good business sense as well, to develop those skills and to recognize our limitations and get help where we need in that sphere, and not just become little dictators simply because we created this kingdom ourselves and therefore by default we rule it. I think it's something that happens a lot in our profession and probably others, but it can create some disastrous results.
What kind of time frame, how many years do you feel that the vets who have been with you for a while go through their career shifts? They go, okay, I'm going to put my hand, I'm going to do this. And then how long until the next thing,
That's a good question. That's a real good question. I haven't really thought about that. I suppose we've probably got two sort of groups of vets. We've got a sort of more mature group, which would include myself, who are pretty settled now, kind of know what we want to do and keep ticking along. And then we have got a few young vets, and it is a constant worry, because we want these guys to flourish and develop. That will eventually result in leaving us, but so far it's been pretty good. That's a great question. I reckon I would say it. I'm just guessing here, mate. I haven't got data, but I would say that there seems to be a sort of sense of perhaps mastery over what they're doing in maybe 18 months to 2 years. And then I think there's a kind of 4 to 5 year kind of big shift. That would be my educated guess.
My perspective is pretty much the same as you. Between every kind of 3 to 5 years, a veterinarian would go, what's next for me? It could be the same. Actually, this is the same for me. But then, especially when they're going through, they want to get mastery over what they're doing, and they feel confident and they feel competent. And then they'll go after 2 years, and then they'll go, what's next? And we found that a lot with our vets who join us as new grads. About 2 years, 3 years in, they're kind of, what's next for me? So we always have to keep on having career conversations and being open and honest about where we're going as a business, so they can see opportunities for themselves. But it was quite enlightening for myself to realize that even myself, every 3 to 5 years, I'm like,
it's a really positive thing. You'd hate to have staff who are just stagnant and stuck in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forward thinking, and as you say, if you can provide it for them, but if you can't, then let them go. Let them, not as in fire them, let them choose to go.
Yep.
Can I go back a little bit, Justin, if you're happy to talk about it? So you owned another practice first, and you just said that didn't work out. Well, you said the partnership ended. I'm curious, because it sounds like you've got your ducks in a row here. Was there a reason why it didn't work? And more specifically, Did you learn much from that, or the specific lessons that you learned from the first go that you could have saved yourself the effort of that first go, or did you need that first go to set you up for where you are now?
No, it was a massive learning curve. And I think at the time it was pretty devastating. But, you know, it didn't take me too long to be able to look back and say, well, actually, that made me stronger. That actually taught me so much. So I was working for a vet, and I sort of got to a stage where I wasn't really enjoying the job, and we were very, very different in terms of our values and what we wanted to get. And that should have been the first alarm bell. But I sort of approached my employer and said, listen, I want to set up on my own. I want to go out on my own, and I'm just giving you a heads up because obviously you're going to need to replace me, and I want to give you enough warning, and this is what I'm start doing. And he said, great, why don't we do something together? And I said, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. And he said, yeah, you know, I've had a number of practices. I know what I'm doing. I can, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's going to take you a long time to figure it out. And I thought, oh, yeah, actually, I've got no idea about finance and equipment and accounts, any of this kind of stuff. So I agreed. And you know, we sort of set up this practice together. When I say together, I basically did everything. He was really a silent partner. And I kept saying, look, we need some sort of agreement, surely. We need some sort of structure. We need some sort of legal thing. He said, no, mate, that's all good. Shake on it and we're all good. So anyway, everything was fine. And I started and everything was going really well and growing. And then I just started realizing that, to be honest, you know, I was getting taken advantage of, and it just wasn't a healthy situation. And so that forced me to, and the way things were run were not, in my opinion, particularly good. So that forced me to kind of start learning about stuff, about accounting, about legal structures, about partnership agreements, about, you know, dividends, about everything. And, you know, as I did that, I realized that really the situation wasn't good. So I tried to remedy it by getting lawyers involved so that we could set up a partnership agreement. But it was stalemate, and it just clearly wasn't going to work. And eventually I just realized that I had no choice. I really just had to, had to leave. And the only way was to sell my share, basically. And so eventually that's what I did. So yeah, at the time it just felt like, wow, I've worked so hard. I haven't earned much. I managed to sell my shares basically for enough that would compensate if I had just been working for someone else during that time anyway. So I was pretty upset, but on reflection, like, it really forced me to learn fast. And so when I set up the second practice, I was really way better equipped from the beginning. And a lot of people have said, you know, well, yeah, partnerships are crazy. I never go into a partnership, and you've had a bad experience. Why would you do it again? And I never set out to have a second partnership, but, you know, the partnership I have now is absolutely, you know, fantastic. And it's basically the reason why we've got to where we are. I don't think I could have done it purely on my own. So I think, like they say, partnerships are like a marriage. If you've got a bad one, it's hell. But if you've got a good one, it just, you know, both individuals just become so much more than their individual selves, I guess. So yeah, that was that experience. So I think I had to go through that to basically educate myself and learn how not to do things, I suppose. And also just how important it was to actually define what your values are, what your vision is, and then make sure that the people that you're getting on board are aligned with those. And that kind of whole value stuff, you know, I know a lot of people, it can sound a little bit kumbaya, sit around the campfire and new age and whatever, but it's absolutely vital. It's probably one of the key, you know, I would put our success down to the people we've got. And the reason we've got those people is because they've aligned with the values and the vision and the purpose that we've defined. And so everybody's swimming in the right direction. And like I said, it can sound a bit wishy-washy, but it's not at all. Every successful organization has built itself on those foundations.
I 100% agree with your values thing there. You could see Hubert and I both nodding in agreement. Values are like your guiding compass.
Yep.
If you know what your values are, you can actually make decisions better, and you get clarity about where you want to go and the vision you have for yourself and what that looks like when you're pretty clear about what are the values you want to have at your core. And like, it wasn't maybe 3 years ago, I had no idea what the values were. And then went through coaching, did a lot of coaching, and then discovered what mine were, and had to change mine just before Lorelei. I had to change my values because my values before were like business, finance, like real kind of driver success kind of things. But now it's still similar, but a lot more love, family, presence.
Yep.
So
Justin, your story resonates. So I feel like I'm living your life. That's exactly me. And it's exactly the same. Well, what I've learned from it and what your story illustrates so beautifully again, I just reiterate the values thing. But sometimes you get an opportunity and you look at it and you go, great opportunity. It's fallen in my lap. I think I should do this because it's here. But then there's this thing in your, well, maybe the voice isn't there in your head, but you should go looking for that voice to say, is there anything that bothers me about this? Yes, on paper, this is a good idea financially, or, exactly as you say, that lack of confidence to say, well, I'm just going to do my own thing, because you go, oh, there's somebody who can help me, and it makes it a little bit easier to make that leap. But that that clash in values is just the thing. I did the same. I tried for 5 years and I thought I could fix it. You go, yeah, I can fix this. I can work on it. I'm going to learn about leadership and relationships, and you can take it so far. But if that clash is just there, that value clash, it's just a chronic thing that erodes at your general well-being. Just don't do it, or if you've done it, get out. is the key thing. I really like that. I'd love to know, with your new partner, you obviously learn from your mistakes, although you get people who get divorced 5 times and make the same mistakes over and over. Did you have specific criteria to say, yeah, our values have to align? Is vague. What did you need in your business partner to make you commit to him or her? I don't know, you said him.
Him, yeah, Matt. Well, I guess first of all, I wasn't looking for a partnership. Neither was he. We knew each other through his wife, Steph, who's also a vet and who actually worked with me just before I set out on my own. And we used to play sport together, touch footy. And I guess I was getting to a point in my practice that was, a year or two old. I was starting to struggle a little bit, getting a little bit burnt out. I also had an injury to my arm that put me out of work for a few weeks. And Matt was, I think, freshly back from the UK, like we all do, and was looking at maybe if he could set up a practice, and just wasn't, finding anything. And he started locuming for me, and we just got on really well. And we knew each other, but we weren't like close mates or anything. And just it was just funny how we just sort of worked as a team, like in the hospital, so well together. And we just found he would see a really good client of mine as a locum, and then just come and say, hey, I just want to let you know, I've just seen Mrs. Jones, and this is the situation, and this is what I told her, and I hope you don't mind. I don't know, I gave her a free bag of dental food to try, blah, blah, blah. And, everything he said was exactly how I would have handled it. And so it just kind of happened. I remember, I think it was just one night I'd gone for a jog, and I got home, and I just was jumping in the pool to just cool down. And I was sitting on the side of the pool and flicking through my phone, and I saw I missed a call from Matt, and I rang him up, and it just kind of came out. We just started chatting, and I just said, yeah, yeah, it was kind of like that. It was kind of, and we were both like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, it just kind of happened. And at that point, though, we didn't just go, sweet, okay, cool, we're partners. He actually then came and essentially locumed or worked for me for a solid 6 months. And during that time, we got some advice from external parties about the kinds of things you need to discuss. And so we spoke about all the kind of, hardcore stuff. How's this going to work? What's the buy-in program? What are the dates? What are the percentages? How are we going to work? How are we going to be remunerated? All this kind of stuff. And
what are you going to do if it falls apart?
Yep. What are we going to do if there's conflict? How are we going to handle things? What's the exit strategy? And work through all that. And then sort of also sat down and kind of spoke about the soft stuff. What do you want to get out of your career eventually? What are we trying to achieve here? What are our values? And they just all aligned. And so we obviously, when the time came, we drew up formal contracts. We got the necessary insurances on each other. And we had, I suppose not legally, but we had jotted down what we both wanted to get out of it, and what the vision was. And yeah, it all just fitted into place. So I think I've been really lucky there, just kind of like the stars aligning. And after the first experience, I certainly wasn't, looking for a partner, but we complement each other fantastically. And it has allowed us to grow. Basically, we actually had our 9th birthday last week. In 9 years, to go from 1 vet, 1.5 nurses, to 9 vets on the books, but I suppose probably 6.5 full-time equivalents, and 22 staff in total, and a practice that I think has a fairly good reputation. It's been a great journey, and Matt and I are now also great friends. Our families do a lot together. Matt and I have just got back from a weeks fishing on Fraser Island, which is our other passion. So yeah, so people often ask me, would you recommend a partnership? And it's sort of hard, isn't it? Because it's like, as long as you go through the process properly and make sure it's going to work, then yeah. But if you do what I did the first time and just, shake on it or think that the problems will go away, well then no. So yeah, my experience in that regard has been very positive.
That's great. There's a lot of wisdom in there. Okay. How are you for time?
Yeah.
Because we haven't even started talking about the state of the profession there. Maybe you've got time. Okay, good. So the reason that I wanted to get you on, Justin, or the final thing, I've been watching this stuff you say for a while, and I can see where it comes from just by listening to how you run your practice. It sounds very appealing. In fact, you might get quite a few job applications after this flooding in. Sounds like a great team that you've built. You wrote an open letter. I don't even know who. Was it just like an opinion piece, or where did that go? Where did you?
Just an opinion piece. Literally just an opinion piece.
In preparation for this, I was looking for it, and that sort of disappeared off the net. I couldn't find it again. But yeah, it's a strange time, and this might be Australia-centric. So for listeners elsewhere, apologies if it doesn't apply to how your profession is. I mean, we both worked in the UK, and it's the same kind of profession. I've got no idea what it's like in the States, but in Australia specifically, there's a lot of changes happening, or it feels like there's changes happening. I get a feeling of what's the word, zeitgeist. They talk about the overarching feeling is, there's some stuff we love about this job, but we're also sick of a lot of shit as vets, and either it changes or we're out. We have options. Do you agree? Is that the sort of feeling that you get from the profession in general?
Yeah, I think what spurred me to write this kind of opinion piece, I guess, was I am the type of person likes to focus on solutions, not problems. And there just been increasing amounts of kind of discussion about what's wrong with our profession, what the issues are. And none of these things are new. Literally, probably all these things have been present since I've been a vet, so 20 years. So this is not groundbreaking. There's nothing new, really. But it's kind of come to a head. And I think there's a number of reasons, but perhaps one of the main ones was COVID induced, perhaps. We've got this increase in demand for veterinary services over here in Australia. We had people buying or adopting pets in massive amounts. So there literally were more pets. We were very fortunate in this country in that people had a lot more disposable income. They weren't going overseas. There were massive government support packages for people. They weren't eating out. They were working from home, staying at home, spending more time with their pets, noticing that limp, seeing their pet vomit at lunchtime, which they would have missed had they been at work. So we basically saw this big increase in demand for vet services. And this is at a time where we've got this shortage of vets, or we've been unable to fill the positions that we need. So it really stretched out. So I think that's probably the reason why this all just came to a head, where people were now really struggling. I think also there are some generational differences, as you get with every generation. And I think the current generation of vets are far more able to kind of articulate their concerns and are not going to just put up with toxic environments as a lot of our generations before did. And so I think that's a factor as well. And I know that's my age, and you do hear this kind of sentiment about, it's just these millennials.
Yeah, we did it tough, but why can't they?
Yeah, we did it tough, but that's the whole point. The whole point is what we experienced wasn't good. So why would we want the next generation to go through it? It's good on them for standing up and saying, no, this isn't good enough. I mean, obviously sometimes they can go too far. And I think there's some things we just have to accept. We do have a generation that's saying, no, hang on, we're not happy with this. So that's what sort of spurred me on, is there was all this discussion, all this complaints, all these problems, but no one was really saying, what are we going to do about it? How do we change? We're just going to keep on moaning. And that's why I thought, well, my attitude to these types of things is, listen, if you don't want to change or you can't change, then just stop complaining. You just got to accept it, you just got to get on with it. Or we've got to make a change. We've got to do something. And that's where that sort of came from. was I wanted to start a discussion around, I suppose, two things. So firstly, we're all talking about these problems, but what are they? What actually is the problem? And is it real or perceived? Because you can't really fix something unless you actually know what that problem is. So that's the first thing, is actually trying to quantify this. And there's been a number of studies done, by the Australian Veterinary Association and other people, certainly in this country, and I know in the UK as well, on looking at the workforce and trying to identify these issues. And look, that they're great, they need to be done, but I still don't think they're really asking the right questions. They sort of come up with these list of problems at the end of these studies, which we already know. So it's, to my mind, it's just reinforcing or restating what we already know, but we need better data about statistics, about what's going on, particularly around attrition of vets from the profession. We need much better data on that. So I wanted to try and quantify it, and I still don't have those answers. And then the second thing was to actually start looking at solutions. So instead of spending all this time on social media complaining, why don't we spend the same amount of time and energy trying to collaborate and see what we can do to actually address some of these issues? And that has started a bunch of discussion. I've had a lot of people contact me, via social media and just privately, and it's been really, really, interesting. It's been an interesting journey, and my opinions are changing, and things. Some things are starting to clarify. Others are just more and more mysterious. But I think the bottom line is, I just really am passionate about doing something about this, and it's not easy. It's not new. It's been going on for years. So let's just finally see what we can do. So that's I guess that's where they came from.
Another passion. What are the sort of top complaints that you, because they come up over and over again on all those discussions. So if you had to list 2 to 5 of them that you think are the biggest things that people are unhappy
with. So I think in that letter, I was a little bit cheesy, but I decided to approach the problem like a disease. And so what I set out from there, and what I said was, I think the number one sort of symptom that we're seeing is a shortage of vets. So that's kind of the symptom. And I likened it to an anemia. Very cheesy.
Not cheesy. Come on. You have to use your skills. Use the skills you have.
And if we think about anemias, but we break those down into non-regenerative and hemolytic, or regenerative or non-regenerative anemias. And I sort of looked at that, why is the shortage there, and looking at all those different factors. But to answer your question, I think probably the number one thing is this concept of a toxic work environment. And that's broken down into a few things. So emotional blackmail from clients, long hours and burnouts, lack of leadership and appreciation. And that's a big one. What else in that spectre? Especially for the younger vets, no career path, not achieving goals. Obviously, euthanasia comes up a fair bit, compassion fatigue, dealing with these life and death kind of situations. So toxic work environments, and then money, remuneration. And that's an interesting one, because there's this constant thought that we're not paid what we work as vets. And I would agree with that. However, it's kind of a random concept if you think about it. Yes, I think if you try and make some sort of comparison, if you try and extrapolate, we've studied X number of years and we're professionals and these are the hours we work and this is a skill and this is a responsibility, you try and liken that to a doctor or a lawyer or something, which is what we do, and we see that they earn way more, we then say, well, hang on, we're worth more. But it is a fairly hypothetical kind of way of looking at things, because worth can be derived from non-monetary sources as well. But I think in this conversation, we're talking about money. And interesting enough, some of the young vets I've spoken to have said it's not actually the dollar value per se that we're earning. It's when we compare it to others, that's where it becomes an issue. But if we actually think about what are we worth, the reality is we're worth what clients will pay. That's what we worth. It's like selling your house. If you think your house is worth 2 million and you put it on the market and you get an offer for 900,000 and you get an offer for 1 million and you get an offer for 950,000, your house is worth 1 million. You may think it's worth 2 million because of the beautiful sculptures that you put up in the garden and the spa bath in the bedroom and whatever, but it's only worth what the market will pay. And so, veterinary practices run at quite a low profit margin. COVID's helped to change it a little bit in the short term, but traditionally they run at quite a low profit margin. I think pre-COVID in Australia, you're talking 8 to 10% as an average. So the money's not there. We're not a government organization. We can't form a union and all go on strike and demand more because we're worth more. And the government's just got to find that money from taxes or somewhere. Literally are worth what we generate and what the profit is. And that's the brutal truth. It's not that practice owners like myself are earning 3 million a year and just don't want to share it. We just are worth what we generate. And so really, I think there needs to be some awareness of the business side of veterinary practice amongst employees if they don't understand those metrics, or we've got to change that turnover and we've got to change that profit. And to my mind, that's, if you boil all of this down, that's actually the one thing that can make real change. Because even if we look at things like the workplace issues, if you want to create a workplace where vets have longer, where they have better lunch breaks, where you've got better staff ratios, where there's a mental program in place, where there's a mental health program in place, where they've got more holidays, all these things that we've identified as problems through surveys and discussions, and all the solutions to those problems require resources, and resources cost money. So nothing's going to change. I was talking to Rob Webster, who you both know, the other day, and he said to me, it's a really good point. He said, you can tinker with a lot of these things. Now, you can tinker and you can improve, and we've shown that in our practice. We've got a much better profitability than most. We've been able to provide a lot of those resources, but there's only so far you can go. And really, the only thing that's going to make real change is dollars. That's what it comes down to. And of course, as soon as we start talking about money, as soon as we start talking about charging more, as vets, we balk and we say, we can't do that. We're going to price veterinary services out of the richer people. What about poor Mrs. Smith? What about little Fluff? We've got to discount that. She's a pensioner. So we've got this duality in our personalities where we feel we're worth more, but we don't behave like that when we're in the consult room. We want to be the nice guys. We want to save those animals. We want to treat that injured wildlife. We want to treat that stray. We want to help the person who's, and I'm no different. I'm talking like I'm some hardcore businessman. I'm not at all. And that's the challenge. And I guess that what frustrates me a little bit through this conversation is I'll say to vets, listen, you're telling me that the ideal workplace is flexible, school hours, 45-minute consults, 15 nurses to one vet, all this kind of stuff. It's great. And you're saying you're worth more. But then when you're in the consult room, you're not behaving like that. And I get it. I'm not blaming those people, but you can't have both. We've got to find some middle ground, I think. We've got to find some middle ground where we can accept some of these things that are inherent in the profession, and we just have to accept them. And we've got to start behaving like we're worth more. We've got to start realizing vets are constantly phoning specialists, getting opinions, doing research on VIM, phoning clients after hours, giving them updates. My lawyer, you flick him an email and that's $80 just for him to read it. We've got to value ourselves. And it's a challenge, but actually, that's what it boils down to. That's really what it boils down to. We've either got to charge more, or there is one other option, I think, that could assist you, and that is we've got to create scale. And that's where the corporates come in. And unfortunately, at this stage, a lot of the corporates are just about private equity and about that cycle of amalgamating and selling. And so it's short-sighted. And so they're not really offering that value that they have in their scale. But that is another option, is if we could create a corporate model that could provide those things. Like I was talking earlier, having my practice, for instance, one X-ray machine for 8 vets instead of one X-ray for one vet. You can have an HR department and a wellness department, et cetera, you can benefit from the scale. So if you could have a corporate that's run by vets perhaps and is 4 vets or something like that, that's another option, I think. So yeah, unfortunately, it comes down to the one thing we don't want to talk about as vets, and that is money.
Yep, I think about this a lot, and I share your thoughts very much. And I'm as exactly like you, caught in that same dichotomy of, I know that's the solution, but that still hurts me in the consult room too. I don't want to be money driven, but you have to be money driven to some degree. It is that catch-22. But
I think I'll just jump in there. It's not about being money
conscious.
driven.
It's money conscious.
Money conscious. It's about, what we've gone through with our vets lately is saying it's about valuing yourself. It's about valuing your services and your time, and making sure that you're doing things like not trying to charge as much as you can, but making sure that you're not missing charges, that you as a vet aren't doing nail clips or something like that, that you're setting boundaries so that the clients can't call you after hours and chat. If that client wants to chat to you about the case and get an update, and that's a phone consultation. So you've got to value your time and think about what you're doing with every hour of your time. And there's a value to that. And actually, it's about providing better customer service and better patient care, but you've got to value that and charge appropriately. So I think you can be successful if you just focus on money. But in our practice, for instance, we would never look at metrics like how many dentals have you done, how many X-rays have you billed this month, how many diagnostics. You're not good enough. You've only sold 15 X-rays this month. We need 30. You need to sell more X-rays. We would never do that because that's not what it's about. But we have to recognize if we feel we're worth what we say we should be worth, and we've got to behave like that, and we've got to manage our time appropriately, and we've got to charge appropriately, and then the cycle continues. We're going to get better customer service, better patient care, better patient health outcomes, more money, happy staff, because they can get paid more, but also they can get better, working environments, and the cycle just goes round and round. So that's my utopia.
I've got a question going back to what you said earlier, and I tend to agree with you on I don't want to say corporatization because it's almost a dirty word for a lot of vets, but centralized, as you say, pooling of resources. But then yet you do have this fragmentation. And you said earlier you wanted to start your own thing, and you do see that lots of little small clinics. Why do we have that centralized fragmentation when the sensible answer is let's pool resources? Why do you think we persist in doing it that way?
I think probably two reasons. So like I said earlier, I think the reason that's become available is because of after-hour facilities. So I would imagine there's not too many one-man bands in rural Australia. I might be wrong, but you don't want to be on call 24/7. You want to be able to share that. And so traditionally, that's why people would band together so that, you could get that. And that was my early career. All the practices I worked with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 vets, because you'd have one night a week on call and every second weekend, every fourth weekend. But and I'm just talking about urban centers now, but with the after hours now taken away, that's not a factor. So I think that's one issue. And then we're just a strange breed as vets, aren't we? We're just autonomous and independent. I just think I did it, so I can't criticize it. We just want to do things our way. We want to do it the way we want to do it. And so off we go and we set up on our own. So it's getting better, but one of the things I've tried to do through the AVA in my local area is try and create a network of vets so that we're actually all working together. And that's actually coming again. There's been working with another vet on the Gold Coast, and we've been trying to get that whole network and collegiality going again. And we've had some success, but I've struggled for years to get vets to band together, even just on a sort of social and sharing level. And we're not bad people. I don't know. We just seem to be furiously independent. And that's another lesson I learned through that whole process of my journey to becoming a business owner. A lot of vets feel like we have to do the accounting. So we got to know everything about accounting. I know a number of vets who've written their own practice management software because they want it their way. We're smart people, but it's foolish to think that we can do all these things. And that's something I would say to people who are thinking about going out on their own and are scared like I was. You don't need someone else. There's accountants, there's lawyers, just get the right people. Yes, it's going to cost you, but get the right people supporting you in their areas of expertise and utilize those. Don't try and become an expert in legal contracts. That's not, and yet we do. Yeah, I think we're just a crazy bunch of people who feel like we can do it all, and that creates a lot of independence. The other interesting shift, jumping a bit all over the place now, sorry, but the other interesting shift I think that COVID has brought, and that has also given some impetus to this whole thing that we're talking about, is that we used to be competing for clients. We were competing against each other. I think that also created this kind of sense of play your cards close to your chest and look after your territory, because we're all trying to compete for clients. That's really shifted now. There's so many vets that I speak to in Australia, and certainly in our area, we're not competing for clients anymore. And through COVID, we've been turning people away, but we are competing for staff. So that's a real shift. That's changed the playing field. We're competing for vets. So really, we need to focus on creating those workplaces and those career paths to attract vets. We need to be really focusing internally now more than externally, because the clients are there. We literally are turning people away. And so many people have had to do this, particularly through COVID, but we can't find vets to service them. So I think that's also going to drive a lot of change in that, and hopefully some degree of collaboration amongst vets, because we're not really now fighting for territory anymore and fighting for clients. we're actually trying to
Survive.
yeah. And I think as a whole, most of us can see that if we work together and improve, the profession as a whole.
What's that saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yep.
And I think it is that.
Yeah,
I think it is what the question of why we want to do it our own way. Maybe it's a capability thing. We're capable. We get through difficult courses at uni, and you do the hard stuff at work, and you start thinking, yeah, shit, I can do it. I can do it all myself. And you probably can, but you're not going to get far. And when you team up, it does get harder because you have to get agreement, and you might not always get your way.
Yep.
But you're going to get further.
Yep.
Gerardo?
I had a comment there just regarding, you were saying, Justin, that we have expectations for ourselves to be like Swiss Army knives, knowing all these things about HR, accounting, all those things. But we have to understand to some degree, but it's almost, we have to understand the value that those professions provide us as a profession. And when we talk about valuing, you got to value yourself. Also then means we have to then value other people and their expertise as well. And then once that kind of clicks, it's like the accountant offers me incredible value, that then the value then moves on, as opposed to just expecting to be valued. We should actually value others in all professions. Like for me, it's like, my car service was like, holy fuck, man, it's in the night. It's like, no, if you want to be valued, then you don't go to them, and as you're driving out and after paying your bill going, that was expensive.
That's such a good point you make, because I hate that reaction when you speak to a client and you give an estimate or a treatment plan and they balk at it, and I take it really personally, and I get an emotional response about it. I think it's that I want to be liked, that many of us have, most vets have. So I feel like they don't like me because they're upset about the bill. But I'm not rude enough to do it to the mechanic or the dentist or whatever. But I'll certainly say to my wife, "Fuck no, that's a lot of money," but I pay it, and I'm not angry at the guy. I don't think it's just I don't want to pay it. It's uncomfortable for me to pay it, but I'll do it because as you say, I identify the value. But then when I flip it around, then I take it so personally, and I just let them bulk it, let them go. Well, it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, man. Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's a very valid point. I totally agree with you, because I catch myself doing the same thing, and you're absolutely right. It gives us some idea of what our client's possibly thinking when they come to us, but also, like you say, it would be hypocritical to not value those other expertise if we're expecting the same appreciation of our skills. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying.
Justin, what you talked about tonight was super important and super valuable. No, just kidding. No, it was. And it's one of the most, it's a very hard conversation to have with people as a business owner when it comes across as, well, the outcome of that value is revenue, right? And I think it's one that we just have to, as a profession, be comfortable with, somehow learn to be comfortable with valuing ourselves, and actually, and as you said, then taking the next level, which is acting on it. So, no, so good, man. Thanks.
But since you've written that letter and talking to people and sharing opinions and hearing opinions, and you did I hear you say that you've changed your mind or your opinion about a couple of things? And if I did hear correctly, like what have you in recent years? What did you used to believe that you might think is not true, or we definitely know is not a fact anymore?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that we had a very interesting forum the other night. I don't know if any of you guys were part of that, but the AVA hosted a kind of open forum about this whole thing, about the vet shortage in Australia, and they had a number of key sort of panelists, not just from the industry itself, but from business, from the dental association, people who had done studies on the workforce, as well as veterinarians, and it was really, really fascinating. And one of the vets there who we know quite well, and you may know who I'm talking about, kept asking the question, what is the problem? Is there a problem? And I think we jumped to the conclusion, and I even saw it used by the AVA president recently when there was a press release regarding the fact that Australia has made immigration for vets now easier. They've upped the veterinary on the skilled list to try and, in the short term, allow vets to come in, even during COVID, to fix this problem. But even the AVA president used the term, this is a short-term measure. We need to fix the problem, which is toxic work environments. And that's what I started thinking the problem was. And I still think there is an issue there. But I think you have to be careful in just assuming without actual data that it is just toxic work environments, that just working as a vet in Australia is just awful. Because most of the practice owners that I mix with and talk to, and sure, this is going to be a biased group, but are doing a phenomenal job at looking after their staff. They really are going, above and beyond. And if I look at, and I'm getting old enough now when I can say, when I was a young man, but things have improved dramatically. There was no working week when we started. The 38-hour working week would probably have been seen as, you never got reviews, you never got a pay rise unless you quit and either your boss offered you more to stay or you found a new job. On call was standard. Everyone was on call, and that crushed me. That was awful. You could work 2-3 days straight without sleep. There was no recognition of mental health, so it was there, no doubt, but people suffered in silence. Whereas now it's way more accepted and recognized. So there have been massive advances, and so this concept that the workplace has just got more toxic, I don't think is correct. I think there's more factors, and yeah, the workplaces need to change. That's true, but I don't think it's as simple as that. I think there's more to it, and I think we've got to be careful not to just say, oh, the conclusion of all of this is that the veterinary workplaces are so toxic, because without sounding condescending, we might just be becoming a little bit precious about the whole thing. It's not greener. The grass isn't that much greener on the other side. We think it is, but you talk to dentists and see what's happened with corporatization in their profession. You talk to pharmacists. Go and talk to a doctor who's working in a hospital. GPs are specialists, really, specialization. It's hard to compare ourselves totally to GPs. You talk to a registrar or someone in a hospital as a doctor. Man, those guys work. They don't get lunch breaks. I'm sure they get paid a bit more, but it's not all milk and honey on the other side. So I think we just got to be a little bit careful in assuming that, I suppose, jumping into victim mode. Now, I do believe there is a problem, and I do believe workplaces need to change, but I really feel they are, and they have, and there has been a lot of benefits already. And I think we've got to be careful that all this discussion isn't making our perception of the problem. Instead, we're not focusing on the positives of our profession. We're not focusing on the solutions. We're just rehashing these issues, and we're all just feeling pretty sad about how crap it is to be working in these toxic work environments. So whilst I started off thinking that's probably the sole cause, and certainly the conclusion that a lot of others have jumped to, I think we just got to be a little bit careful there. There's some things we're just going to have to accept. We can't have a utopia where you work school hours 9 to 2:30, and you have an hour-long consult, and you have a 2-hour lunch break with massages, and you earn 150K. That's kind of what we're saying. It won't. That's all we're worth. What about the positives? What about the fact that with this degree we can travel around many countries in the world and work and travel like a lot of us have done? What about the fact that you can work part-time? My wife, for instance, she was unable. Her profession just didn't allow that, so she couldn't go back part-time. It wasn't an option. The fact that so many practice owners are being progressive, that this whole conversation is happening. There's a lot of good to focus on. Whenever I sit down with my social media and IT guys, they always say, man, you guys have got the best profession for socials. Every day there's a picture of a puppy or a dog that you saved, or it's cool. Like every day we do something fantastic. It's pretty damn awesome. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. We shouldn't jump to this kind of position of being a victim, and that is just rubbish being a vet, because there's so much more to it. And I don't think it's as simple as saying it's just toxic workplaces. There's a lot more to it. So that's one thing I've changed my opinion on. And the other thing that I've also realized is that a lot of these issues around money and around charging are in our own minds, and we're actually our own worst enemies in that respect. And that's why, like I was saying, if we can just focus on valuing ourselves, if we're going to keep saying we're worth more, then we need to stop behaving like that. Like I use the example of a lawyer. Lawyers I always try and think of them when I think I need to behave differently, because I've had contracts sent to me by lawyers where they've made a mistake, and I've emailed them and said, mate, you put the wrong address in there. You need to change that contract, and they've charged me for that communication. What we're saying is that we want to compare ourselves with professions like that. We want to earn what they earn. And if that's the case, then that's how you're going to have to behave. So like I said, there's a line, there's a limit, there's a happy medium. And the other thing that I've changed my mind about is that there's a lot of talk about it's the university's fault. They're not producing the right people. We're not getting resilient vets. We're getting these snowflakes coming out, and they can't cut it. So we've got to change. We've got to get more resilient vets. It's this word resilience, which really annoys me. And I don't think that's the case. I haven't experienced that. It seems like to me they certainly are more prepared than we are, and given better ideas of what to expect when they qualify. So they're aware of what's ahead of them in terms of work-life balance, remuneration, all that kind of stuff. Certainly if they're not, that needs to happen. And people are saying they're not ready. They're not day one ready. I totally disagree. I don't think they should be day one ready, that you could take them out, stick them on their own sole charge and leave them. I don't think that's the test of a good university degree. We need to be providing support for these guys in that first year. I certainly was thrown in the deep end, but it wasn't good, and I made mistakes. And I think the university are producing, in my experience, fine graduates. And the answer to a situation that is not good is not to just produce tougher individuals or something.
When I think about this, it's probably very overly dramatic, but of the trenches in the First World War, where the guys had to run over the edge, run into machine gun fire, and saying, well, the solution is we've got to train those soldiers better. They've got to be tougher and more resilient, and then you send them over the edge and they get mown down anyway. So you're right, the environment has to change. But I do agree on it. I think toxic is a strong word. I think I've hardly met a practice owner or a veterinary leader or a veterinarian, for that matter, who's a bad guy, who's trying to screw somebody. Actually, I lie. I have some. But for the most part, everybody's doing their best. And I think the problem is, as humans, when there's a problem, we like to think in stories, and part of a good story is a villain. We're going to pick the villain.
Yep.
It's the evil practice owner who creates the toxic work culture, or it's the shitty universities who. It's not that simple. It's multifactorial. It's all of it and it's none of it. Yeah. And it's your own role as well, exactly as you say.
I think also there's a lot of issues that are actually societal and generational, and not, we're claiming them as our own. We're saying, this is a problem in our profession. And actually it's not. We've got a generation who want to achieve goals rapidly, who want a career path, who are going to change jobs way more than older generations did, who have different expectations around work-life balance, who often have an expectation of ethics and values in their workplace aligning with their own, etc. So there are quite a few issues that are generalized to the workforce and not specific to our profession. And we also got to be careful there not to just blame our profession for some of those, because they're just the changes that are occurring naturally in society across the board, not just in our little corner of the world.
I could talk all night, but we probably have to wrap.
That was really good. John was awesome.
There's a lot of wisdom in there. I think you'll go far in terms of going together. You're on this boat, and hopefully you get the right people on the journey with you. And it's incremental. Nothing's going to change overnight. It's stepped in the right direction.
One key thing that I got from this, and I wanted to recap it just before we left, but it was about value again. But you said this one line, which was like, we looked at other professions and then we wanted to be seen as them, paid like them, but then we don't want to act like them. So in order to value ourselves, we actually have to behave like those professions who do value themselves. And that was, I don't know, that was pretty powerful for me.
Yeah, there's something that really struck me out. On that forum, there was a gentleman from the Dental Association, and they were talking about the problem in rural practice. And I know that, certainly in our profession, they face their own challenges. But he spoke about the fact that, and this has government support as well, that they were trying to provide dental services to remote communities, to rural areas. And he just stated matter-of-factly, they found that you had to have at least 3,700 clients per dentist to make it viable. So in other words, there's a certain revenue, there's a certain minimum to make this business plan work. And in a lot of those areas, it didn't work. So guess what? There are no dental practices there. And this is humans. So they looked at the business model, they looked at what was sustainable, they had their minimum, and when it didn't work, well, we can't provide a dental practice for that community. It's as simple as that. It's not sustainable. Whereas we're not doing that. We've got guys, particularly in rural practices, who are working their guts out because they want to keep their doors open, because they want to serve that community. and they're earning less than the locums that they're paying to work for themselves. We've got to realize that whatever we do has got to be sustainable. And that's on a lot of levels. But one of those is obviously the financials. And if you're working yourself in the bone just simply to keep the doors open, to try and provide for your patients, stop. You're literally going to kill yourself. Just stop. It's not worth it. And if dentists can say, no, that community, sorry, you can't have a dentist because it doesn't work out. And we've got to start thinking like that. We've got to start saying to ourselves, what does a sustainable practice look like? What does it take? What does it cost? Therefore, what do we have to charge for that service? And if it doesn't add up, we've got to be okay with saying, we're not just going to work for nothing. We're not just going to work 80 hours a week because we have to out of some sense of duty. If it's not sustainable, it can't last. And that just struck a chord with me. We've got to be a little bit more harsh in realizing that what we do has got to be sustainable, and if it's not, it has to stop. We can't just work ourselves for nothing. That's just not an option. We've got to find another way. So that's my parting thought.
He's been wanting to use that for ages. He finally did it because he doesn't realize that when you press the button, someone else speaks that we can't hear it. Anyway.
How's the timing on that? All right, quickly wrap up. Gerardo, what was the lie out of the three things?
Oh, the lie. Oh, shit.
I'll give you my opinion.
Gouged in the ass by a buffalo.
That's real life in Africa, mate.
I can imagine it happening, though.
I'm going to go with bitten by the horse because A, you don't strike me as somebody who's going to be scared of horses. And B, he's too intelligent.
Oh shit! No, you're wrong. Gerardo's got it. I did do a lot of wildlife work, and I was in those situations, but I never got gouged. I always got out on time.
Now I've just insulted our guest by calling him scared and stupid.
I'm still scared of horses, man. It's got nothing to do with intelligence. It's a primal fear.
I agree. Horses, not my thing. I went through uni without having to do a dental, without having to do a foot examination on a horse. I aced my vivas and my exams and then walked out going, never going to see a horse ever again.
One of the most scared I've ever been in my life was doing my first horse castrate at OP, at Honest Word. Having to stick a needle full of ligocane into a stallion's testicle. It's like, is there a more stupid thing to do in the world? I'm literally sweating and shaking. Podcasts. Are you a podcast fan, Justin?
Yes, only fairly recently. I guess one of the downsides for me is my old four-wheel drive does not allow me to Bluetooth podcasts. So yeah, and in terms of what I listen to, because I know that's what you can ask me, well, the number one thing I listen to when I go for a walk or a run is not veterinary at all. It's the Australian Lure Fishing Podcast. So if there are anyone out there who likes fishing with lures, it's an awesome resource. Other ones I listen to, obviously the Vet Vault now. I listen to one called Radical Candor. That's a leadership one, which I find pretty good. And I've started listening to one suggested by yourself, and that's Seth Godin Akimbo. I quite enjoy that. It's quite nice, short little things to listen to. And then the only other one that I do listen to, and I don't want to be pigeonholed here, is Tony Robbins. I'm not one of those Tony Robbins people. I've never been to any Tony Robbins events or anything like that. But I do find if I pick through some of his stuff, I find quite a lot of value in some of those. Some of them are really inspiring. And yeah, I find those can often give me a bit of a lift when I need it. So yeah, I'm definitely not the podcast guy.
That's a good choice.
That's what I listen to.
Good collection.
And final question. You're at a vet conference. COVID is over. We can have a conference. And because it's over, all the veterinary new grads of the world have been invited, and they're in the lecture theatre. And you've got a couple of minutes to give them just one little bit of advice for their careers. What's your advice going to be?
Oh, I should have prepared something, shouldn't I? I would say that the profession that we find ourselves in is one that's definitely going to provide them with a roller coaster of emotions. But it's really important to continually just focus on the positive. It's really easy to let that one case that didn't go well, or that one client to really bring you down. So you need to constantly reflect on the good you're doing, and you need to constantly stop and reflect, particularly in the early parts of your career, on the progress that you're making, and always remind yourself of those good things. Don't let those negative things knock you. I would also say to them, for the first year or two of their career, they must find themselves a supportive environment that's going to nurture them and grow them. Forget the money in the first year or two. Just forget it. Just get yourself somewhere that you're going to actually get through those first little steps along the journey in a supportive environment, and you're not going to get crushed by negative experiences. So that's just so key, to find that place that fits and that's going to look after you. And then in general, and this is something I'm only learning now at my ripe old age, is that you've got to set boundaries in life, and you've got to make those clear to other people. And it's hard. And our profession, often setting a boundary is interpreted as that you don't care. But, I've certainly in my career reached points of just burnout and resentment, because everything I've done is just for everyone else. And you've got to set those boundaries. You've got to stick to what you need as an individual to stay recharged and grounded. And you've got to make those clear, to others, so they know where the line is. So that would be my on the spot words of wisdom.
There's a lot of wisdom in those 3 major points.
That was excellent. Justin, thank you so much for your time on the podcast and the time that you're putting into thinking and sparking conversation in this. It's all for the better. Thank you so much.